Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Living in Switzerland. The series is brought to you by Rigby. We are a staffing and project services company based in Zurich. If you or anyone you know of is looking for a new role in Switzerland, or if you're looking to hire, let us know. We'd be happy to help. The best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. Then, if we have anything that might be of interest, we'll gladly let you know.
Alright, so today we are joined by the 5 authors of the brilliant book 50 Amazing Swiss Women. They are Laurie, Theurer, Hayoz, Anita, Lehmann, Alnaaze, Nathoo and Barbara Nigg. So as you may know, February 2021 marked the 50th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote in Switzerland. This book celebrates the diverse accomplishments, struggles and strengths of Swiss women. So ladies, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, could we begin by saying, how did this book come about?
I guess that's a question for me. I have to take you back in time to a previous book that I wrote, which is called Swisstory, which is an enjoyable history of Switzerland for kids. The book is 20 chapters, and by the time I got to about the 19th chapter, I realized that most of the chapters were exclusively about Swiss historical men, and pointed that out to the publisher, who very wisely said, well, why don't we make the 20th chapter about Swiss women? And I did exactly that, but I had a word limit of about 2,000 words, which was not nearly enough. And so I mentioned to him that it would be wonderful to have a book solely about amazing Swiss women. And he very wisely agreed to that. And 50 Amazing Swiss Women was born.
Great.
You make it sound easy.
Oh, yes.
It helped that he very wisely agreed to all your recommendations.
Yes, he did. And it also helped that when I realized that there was a very short amount of time until the 50th anniversary of Swiss women's right to vote, and not enough time for me to write it on my own, 4 of my author friends very wisely decided to join me when I asked them.
Very wisely and very naively. That's right.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you then, guys, what inspired you? What motivated each of you to take part in the project?
I can say what motivated me. I mean, first, all of Laurie's begging, that really made a difference.
Women supporting women, Katie.
Yeah, women supporting.
It's called making an offer you can't refuse. Get the language right.
Now, let's remember this correctly. I think the longest it took any of you to agree to participate in writing this book was about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Might have been you, Katie. I don't know.
Yeah, I might have been the 10-minute holdout. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, for me, I thought it was a great idea. And I thought, oh, that sounds like fun, but I didn't realize I'd be so invested in it. Once we got started, it was pretty astonishing to me how much it affected me. And it really woke up a pride in me, a pride of being a woman, pride of being a Swiss woman. And I was really proud of writing this book too, with all of my co-authors. So yeah, apart from the begging, it was a cool idea. That's why.
We couldn't have done it without you.
Exactly. I'm very glad I begged in that case.
I mean, for me, having grown up in Switzerland, without any real female role models, for me, it was really the book that I would have liked to read when I was a child. So let me tell you a little anecdote about this. So when I was little, my parents used to have their friends over, and my father's friends are all pretty conservative kind of men. And I used to get into arguments with them when I was sort of 12, 13, 14, because I was like, hey, women should have the same rights and should get paid the same amount for the same work. And, shouldn't be staying at home cooking for all day, every day. And those men, there's this one guy who sort of looked at me and he sort of said, well, if women are so amazing, where are the female Beethovens? Where is the female Mozart? Where are the female Goethes and Schillers and, authors? And I didn't have an answer to that. Mm-hmm. And it annoys me to this day that I couldn't turn around and show him.
So this book is the answer.
yeah, this is your answer. And this is, for me, it was a very, very strong motivation to write this book, because I want my daughter and other Swiss children to grow up and knowing that women have contributed just as much as men to the history of the world, and to bring that to light.
You hear? Actually, Anita, I think you've just answered the next question, which is, in case there's anybody out there who might still be wondering, why would you say, please, in your own words, it's important to highlight women's achievements?
I'll jump in on that because I was lucky enough. So we each took 10 women to write about in the book. And one of the first women I got to speak to was Iris Bonet, and she is the director of Women and Public Policy at the University of Harvard. So her story was about being the first Swiss woman to be a professor at Harvard, actually. And so when I knew a little bit about what she was doing. She was working on unconscious gender bias. But when I spoke to her and I looked at what she was doing, she was looking at how do you change people's behavior and attitudes towards women in the workplace primarily. So she found that, companies are spending billions and billions of dollars on diversity training and trying to get people to change the way they think about women and women's role in the workplace. And there's no evidence actually that it actually works. So what they found is that she ran across a study done about an orchestra in the States that was having difficulty with the constitution, the makeup of the orchestra. It was primarily men. I think there were only 5% that were women, and this is in the 70s. And no matter how hard they tried, they were having difficulty hiring more female musicians. And it wasn't because there was a lack of female musicians coming to auditions. And they had spoken with the directors and the musicians doing the hiring, and they believed firmly that they had no bias, that they were actually choosing the best musicians available. So what they did to change the makeup of the orchestra or to give more women opportunities was they hung a curtain between the person who was doing the hiring and the person who was doing the auditioning. And within a very short period of time, the number of women in the orchestra jumped from 5% to 35%. So what they found was trying to talk to somebody about the way they do the hiring didn't work, but making a simple environmental change did. And so they also found that, for example, in Harvard, at the university in the hallways, so the student body is about 50% women. And yet all of the paintings down these hallways are pictures of male leaders, historical figures and leaders and businessmen who have succeeded. There were no paintings at all of women. So what they started to do was change the paintings so that there were more women, so that the student body, not just the women, saw that women were leaders, but the male students see that that is the case. And she recommends that they do that in boardrooms as well. And change things like, for example, when you're looking for a new employee, instead of you take the names off of the applications so that you cannot see the gender, you cannot see the person's background, stuff like that. So that's what she was looking at. And when I talked to her, it struck me that that's what this book was all about as well, is that we were providing role models. It's about offering children role models. And that's why there are so many different types of occupations and types of women from different backgrounds and different dreams they have, because we wanted to make sure there was something for everybody in the book, for boys and girls, so that if you were into sports, you found an athlete. If you were into science, you found a scientist. If you were into dance, you found a dancer, whatever. There's all kinds of occupations. So basically, I think it's important because it provides kids with role models, particularly with girls, because as Anita said, there were, and I had the same experience as a kid, there are no books. There are now, and there are more now, but there were none when I was a kid about girls achieving anything.
Mm-hmm. And normalizing the presence of women.
Exactly.
On the walls at Harvard or in the orchestra and so on.
It's just about seeing yourself reflected everywhere, right? Like it's about, whether seeing, however you say it, whether seeing is believing, representation matters. It's seeing that somebody who is like you, that looks like you, can go out and do these great things, is going to then motivate the next generation to do even greater things. But, it's about just seeing that, whoever you are reflected in history as having been able to do interesting things. And it's not just the young boys or the men that can do that.
And it goes even beyond seeing someone who looks like you doing things. It also means seeing people that don't look like you doing things. So it's also for boys and men, because basically the more we're exposed to something, the more we normalize it, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to normalize seeing, strong women, women who fight for what they believe in, women who fight society's expectations, or even women who fit into them for certain, we want to normalize their spot in society and how we see them.
Yeah, it's about normalizing the range, isn't it? Is that, boys can do 100 different things and that's fine, but so can women, so can girls.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, you don't have to be within a specific range. You can't be, do stunts and move in Hollywood movies. You can be an international superstar in tennis. You can work on women's rights. You can work on all sorts of things. You don't have to be a nurse unless you want to be a nurse. You don't have to be a stay-at-home mom unless you want to be a stay-at-home mom. There's other things.
What's also interesting in that is that she also found in a study that when you show women a picture of a female leader that they know, just an image before they go on stage to give a presentation, their presentation is rated much higher than if they hadn't seen an image of that woman, or if they'd seen an image of a man beforehand. So it does also have that impact. When we see women succeeding, when we see images of other women succeeding, we take that information in and it affects how we behave ourselves. We see what is possible, I think. Broadens our expectations of what's possible and what we can achieve.
Could you tell us what the creative process was like for this book? So how did you go about getting the information needed about the women, and how did you research it?
I mean, it was a really interesting process because as Laurie mentioned, we had a short amount of time to get this book out there, which is why she brought us all in to help her out to write these different chapters. And we all had different styles.
Yes, very wisely.
Very wisely, because we were all extremely wise. And we all have different writing styles and research styles. And so, I mean, some of it was sort of online research, some of it was interviews, but, there was some amazing benefits in working as a team. And one of the greatest benefits was the fact that we were able to share our work as we went along, and we were able to edit and improve each other's work as we were going. So, you're writing a chapter about somebody, you're not sure where to go, you share what you have, the others will look at it and add some comments. Oh, maybe you should fix this here, add this here, and it was through this teamwork that we could really create these great chapters that we were able to produce. And then the other thing, which was funny too, is, and I think I've mentioned this a few times before, is how we all have our own sort of writing rhythms. And I'm very much a night owl, and the other writers were more human hours, and so they would be commenting during the day, and I'd sort of at 2:00 in the morning, I'd start looking at comments and commenting on everyone else's things. But in the end, it actually kind of worked, because then when they got up, they had my comments. Then when I was functional again, I'd get their comments, and so it was just one of the things that we don't often talk about in the creative process. When you think about writers, you think about this sort of solitary person on a mountaintop, discovering and writing things. But one of the great joys of this book was writing it as a group, because we could help each other and become, even more creative and better writing, and working with the illustrator who's not with us today as well. I mean, Amelia is just extraordinary, and she also added a lot to the process as well. So I think that was really important in terms of the creative process.
Bear in mind that all of this was done not only within an incredibly short amount of time. I think we had 3 months to the day to produce 50 chapters and critique them and have them ready, so the book could be ready on time. Exactly. But then we're also working remotely from each other during a pandemic, with several, everyone who participated knew me, but they didn't necessarily know each other. And I think even a couple of you haven't even met in person yet. And yet we were able to build this camaraderie and produce this book in an incredibly short amount of time.
And the 5 of us have yet to be in a room together at the same time.
Exactly.
Unless it's a Zoom room. That's
Yeah,
the only-
exactly.
That we've done many times.
And how did you whittle the list down to 50? What were the criteria besides that there had to be women?
Great difficulty.
Yeah, yeah, it really was. It was with great difficulty.
Yeah, the more we looked, the more we found, and it was incredible. I mean, the number of women we would have liked to write about, it's, yeah, incredible.
Is there a sequel on the horizon?
50 more amazing Swiss women. We'll see. But in terms of criteria, I would say that, the longer the list got, the more we realized that Switzerland's been shaped by women of all kinds. And, if you just thinking of those of us in this Zoom room right now, we all have strong ties to Switzerland. Either we were born in Switzerland, we've lived in Switzerland, or we're married to someone who's Swiss. We all have strong ties to Switzerland. So we also know that being a Swiss woman can mean many different things. So we wanted the book to reflect that. So we had women who were born Swiss, women who became Swiss, and we also wanted, like Barb had said earlier, we wanted this book to reflect not only different women, but also different interests for kids. And we wanted kids to see themselves in here. So we wanted, some women who were sporty, some who were into politics, some who were scientists. And we wanted them to be coming from, maybe one from Geneva, someone else from Zug, someone from the mountains. So there were a lot of criteria. And we had to really whittle it down based on trying to get the most diverse set of people possible in order, to inspire the most readers.
The really difficult part of that is that, I came to these four with a list that I had already collated. And as we started looking, all five of us, for more amazing Swiss women that we might want to add to that list and select from, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And it's the concept of the more you look, the more you find. And right down until the last weeks of selecting who's going to be writing about which women, we were still adding names to that list. Because as Katie said, we wanted to ensure a maximum amount of diversity in the women we were going to be writing about. And I think in the end, we had a list of names that was reaching nearly 500. I mean, it was a lot of potential women, and whittling that down to 50. We did not choose the 50 best amazing women in Switzerland, but rather the most diverse and the most interesting that we wanted to present together as a group of 50.
And the ones that we had information on, because
there were some particularly historical women who did some extraordinary things that unfortunately you can only find one or two lines on. And those one or two lines that you found was usually in a biography about their husband or something like that. So you couldn't find, something about some of the great things that they did. And I think COVID, played a real role in that too, because you couldn't go and spend 4 hours in a library in Lausanne, looking up research about this, this particular woman who you found really interesting, and bug the librarian about it, where then you can probably get more information. But because the libraries were closed and whatnot, you had to rely on, either ordering books or seeing what you could find online. And so, as Katie mentioned, we didn't have all the information we would have liked on some of these great, particularly historical women.
Mm-hmm. There are historical women in there, of course, but also modern day women, right, Alnaaze?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we definitely balanced it out. Like, we balanced out within the book. You'll see that we've got, women who are out there today still doing great things, and, women who did great things hundreds of years ago. I think my point was just more to the fact that when we were trying to balance it out, some of the information was missing on the historical ones, while the modern ones, the ones that are still around today, was great. Most of them we were able to interview. The really, really famous ones, not so much, but there was a lot out there on them anyway. But the other ones we were able to, to contact, and we were able to sit down and talk to them, at least on Zoom, if not face to face.
And are there any common threads or themes that you noticed between these 50 women that have inspired you?
Well, when I first started doing the research, what popped out to me, which I didn't really think of before, was that how important it was back then for women to have their fathers sponsor them or support them in some way. So when a woman did achieve something 100 to 200 years ago, it was often because she had the support of her father. One example is Angelica Kaufman. She was a rock star in terms of being a portrait painter in the early 18th century. She was world famous. But when she wanted to study art, she couldn't go to art school because women weren't allowed to art school. Women weren't allowed to practice with live nude figures. And when she did portraits, so when she did take portraits of people, she had to have her father in the room with her the entire time, even as an adult. So she was very restricted, but she was not the only one. So for me, that was really something that left an impression, definitely. The other thing quickly is throughout all of them is that you don't achieve your dream in a bubble. You don't do it alone. And it was sort of echoed in what we were doing, because as I was researching these women and talking to these women, I found they all had a mentor of some kind or someone who believed in them and supported them. And we had the same thing, because I don't think that one person would have been able to do this book at the time, in the amount of time. And we really worked together, like Alnaaze was saying. But I think I remember Katie also had something really that popped up for her. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you mentioned as well something, that a common theme where you ran into a few women who didn't think they should be in the book.
Oh yeah, I think several of us actually ran into a few women who didn't think they should be in the book. These were the modern women that we asked to interview, and we would approach them either via email or telephone and say, explain the project and say we would like to interview for this project. And a common response was, me? Why me? There's nothing special about me. And when you ask the five of us, yeah, there's something really special about this person. So that was a common theme.
I mean, we had women who didn't even respond because they thought it was a joke. I had somebody who didn't even respond because she thought I was making, that it was a joke, that it wasn't real. And I had to go back many times and say, no, you are extraordinary. We want you in this book. Everybody agrees. Please, sit down and talk to me, and then you could get an interview. But it's amazing how these extraordinary women are also somehow don't see what they're doing as extraordinary. And it goes back again to the initial questions of why is this book important and why is it important to highlight women's stories, is because there are so many extraordinary women out there doing these wonderful things, and their stories do need to be told.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other common thread I would say is that, yes, all of these women were supported and they were believed in by someone, but they also believed in themselves enough to persevere even when they came up against obstacles.
Mm-hmm. And well, this one is a little bit self-serving maybe, but I'm dad to two young girls growing up in Switzerland. Is there a message that you would pass on to kind of lead them towards the path to greatness? It's a bit of a big question there. But
I mean, the first thing I think for me is that, like we were talking about when we were talking about the threads, is the question of being supportive of their choices, right? One of the things that we always saw is that when you had one of these women who said, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an artist, I want to be a stunt woman, the male figure was there saying, yes, I support you. Yes, I will be there for you. And it's not always the case with women. You find women who are successful despite the male figures versus because of. But the because of is definitely a huge benefit, I think. So I think as a Papa Bear, the first thing is like, yes, I support you. Let's do this.
I think my advice for young girls would be to take a really good look at what your strengths are. What things are you naturally good at? If you're not maybe naturally good at something, maybe it just really interests you, and to go ahead and find out more about that and seek new experiences and try to develop that. Find your passions. And if you run up against obstacles, as Katie was talking about, or even failures, don't let it stop you. Just follow your passion and know that these things are just trying to teach you something. And so pay attention to that. And remember that success and greatness aren't defined by other people or fathers or anybody else, but by you and what you're passionate about and what you believe is important.
I think that you asked the question, what can you say to young women? And I think, and going back to what I learned with Iris Bonet, is it's not just what you say, it's what you do. And she had an example where she gave a speech to her gymnasium class at graduation, and she actually complained about the education and said that there wasn't enough critical thinking. It was all memorizing. And the chap who was in charge of the school and for education for the canton came over after she gave her presentation and told her that it was terrible that she did that. And her father came up and stood up, and he said, if my daughter says it's that way, it is that way. And she said that was a foundational moment for her, because he stood up for her and backed her. And I think if you have an opportunity to do that for your daughters at some point, do that. And the other thing I would recommend is read as much as you can about women's experiences so that you understand what they're going through. I can recommend some books, but this is an older book, but my husband read this when my daughter was an adolescent. It's called Reviving Ophelia, Saving the Selves of Adolescent Girls. And it really helped him understand the pressures that girls are under. I think that's really an important thing to do. So it's not so much what you say as much as trying to understand what they're going through and being there for them.
Yes, and I would add to that the positive role models to me are really, really important. Seems like, I think it's pretty well understood. We talk a lot about systemic oppression and all that stuff, which is all true. However, I think as an individual, it doesn't help you to think about yourself in that way. And or as and therefore I think our book is very purposefully done in a very, very positive way. We're not talking about, oh no dear, look how we are all suffering. It's about, look at all the things we've done, or look at all the things that we're able to do and are capable of doing, and all the achievements that we've made. And I think that is much more powerful in many ways than and I think for an individual, for a girl growing up in the world, I think thinking of themselves as somebody who can do things rather than somebody who's being stopped from doing things is much more helpful.
And helping us maybe sometimes also understand and read certain cues that they may not get. I'm thinking of, for example, when I think of the Thilo Frey story, which is one that just sort of transformed the way I think of myself in Switzerland as a woman of color. And one of the things that, her father gave her some advice on how to behave, within the world that she was moving into, in Neuchâtel when she moved to Switzerland. And some of the advice that he gave her, it was about navigating the world that you're in. So, she's a woman of color arriving to Switzerland in the 20s, and the advice he gave her was to act as white as a lily. And so that sort of has a double meaning, doesn't it? Number one is you have to be beyond reproach, but number two is also blend into your environment. Do we say that that's good advice today? Not necessarily, obviously, right? But back then, 1920s, women of color in Switzerland, absolutely. So one of the and she mentioned it in her interviews, and that was a defining piece of advice for her, and it helped her navigate to what was eventually a successful political and academic administrative career. Was that advice that she was given, because it helped her assimilate into the environment that she was living in. So parents have to sometimes just help the girls, help the children navigate the world that they're in and understand certain cues. So whether in my case it's Thilo Frey, or for somebody else it's something else, but I think that's a very important thing as well.
I think that's great advice, guys. Thank you. And thank you again for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. We'll include links in the show notes to our guest and to further materials about some of the topics that we've spoken about today. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by Rigby. We're a staffing and project services company here in Zurich. If you would like our help either to hire or to be hired, let us know. Best way to do that is by going to rigby.ch/apply and filling out the form. You can also sign up for our newsletter at rigby.ch/newsletter to receive our Living in Switzerland guide. We'll send you one email per month about expat-focused news and jobs in Switzerland. So thanks, and until the next time.